This story begins against the backdrop of World War II, specifically during the transfers the Japanese forces conducted to move Allied POWs to their territory for forced labor. These transports took place on vessels that gained a dark reputation for their inhumane and lethal conditions, becoming known as hell ships. The situation was so chaotic and dangerous that many of these ships were attacked by friendly fire from Allied forces, causing thousands of soldiers from both sides to lose their lives in the middle of the ocean. The setting is 1944 aboard the Arisan Maru, where tension and desperation are felt in every corner. Here we meet Saito, a Japanese soldier who has fallen from grace among his own people and is treated with contempt, and Bronson, an Allied prisoner. Their fates become intertwined in the worst possible way when the ship suffers a devastating attack that unleashes panic among the crew and prisoners. Explosions shake the metal structure as water begins to flood everything, and amidst cries for help and generalized chaos, many try to escape the death trap before it is too late. Following the shipwreck, the tide drags the survivors onto the shore of a seemingly deserted island. Saito regains consciousness on the sand, dazed and battered by the violence of the sea, but he soon realizes his nightmare is not over. He is shackled by the ankle to Bronson, the enemy prisoner lying unconscious a few yards away. The situation is critical because both men represent opposing sides of a brutal war, and now they are forced to share every movement due to the irons binding them together. When Bronson wakes up and sees the Japanese soldier, his instinctive reaction is violence. Fueled by accumulated hatred from the war and the suffering endured on the ship, he attacks Saito without a second thought. The two men engage in a fierce brawl on the shore, rolling through the sand and water while trying to dominate one another. But the chain limits their movements, turning the confrontation into a clumsy and exhausting struggle. However, the fight comes to an abrupt halt when something strange happens in the water, a non-human presence stalking them from the depths. Bronson is wounded by this unknown creature, forcing them to scramble out of the water and take refuge on dry sand, realizing they are not alone on the island. Despite their mutual distrust, fear of what they just saw forces them into a temporary truce. Bronson, bleeding and confused, tries to process what just happened, while Saito warns him that they must be prepared in case the thing decides to return. The survival instinct begins to outweigh their hatred, and Saito decides to share an improvised weapon with Bronson, making it clear that one cannot function without the other as long as they remain chained. It is a tense moment where both understand that their enmity must take a back seat if they want to make it out of there alive. The two men begin to scour the beach in search of anything the sea might have washed up after the wreck that could be useful. Among the debris of the disaster, they find crates with supplies, and luck seems to smile on them slightly when Bronson finds cigarettes and some coffee, small luxuries that seem like treasures in the middle of nowhere. However, the search also brings painful moments as Bronson stumbles upon the corpse of a young soldier he knew. Upon seeing him, he breaks down a little, expressing his grief as he recalls that the boy was just an innocent kid tortured for no reason. He blames the Japanese for their cruelty, calling them beasts. Saito listens in silence, understanding that the wounds of war go beyond the physical, but decides not to respond to the provocation. Instead, he offers Bronson a pair of scavenged sandals so he can walk better, a small gesture attempting to ease the tension. Night begins to fall, and hunger sets in. Saito manages to catch some crabs and cooks them over a makeshift campfire. At first, Bronson is reluctant to accept anything from his enemy, but hunger is stronger than pride, and he ends up accepting the offer. As they eat, the atmosphere relaxes a bit, and Bronson admits the food tastes like heaven after suffering hardships for so long, feeling a fleeting sense of home for an instant. It is in this moment of calm that they decide to formally introduce themselves, ceasing to be merely anonymous soldiers and becoming Bronson and Saito, two men trapped in the same misfortune. They know they cannot remain chained if they want a real chance at surviving or defending themselves against the creature prowling the island. They find a metal tool among the rubble and decide to try breaking the chain links. Bronson strikes with force but without success, until Saito points out the exact spot where he needs to hit for the metal to give way. Suspicious but with no other choice, Bronson follows Saito's instructions, and after a precise blow, the chain breaks, finally freeing them from the physical bond. The sensation of freedom is an immediate relief for both, and they repeat the process to free Saito as well, sealing a sort of tacit pact of collaboration. They briefly celebrate their success, feeling they now have a better chance of facing whatever comes next. But the joy is short-lived. Saito, always alert, notices something strange in the atmosphere and signals Bronson to be quiet. In the distance, they see a small boat approaching the shore. It carries other survivors, Japanese soldiers who have managed to reach the island. This drastically changes the dynamic, as Saito knows that if his compatriots see Bronson, they will kill him without hesitation. Quickly, Saito hands his supplies to Bronson and urges him to hide in the jungle as fast as possible, promising that he will handle the situation. Bronson runs into the thicket to hide while Saito remains on the beach awaiting the new arrivals. The Japanese soldiers disembark and approach cautiously upon seeing the campfire and signs of activity. Saito feigns having been alone the entire time, but the soldiers notice there are 2 canteens and footprints, suggesting someone else's presence. Tension rises as they begin to interrogate Saito, suspecting he is hiding something or someone. One of the soldiers discovers the shackle Saito still wears on his ankle, revealing his status as a prisoner or a traitor, and the situation turns hostile. They accuse him of betraying his homeland and demand to know the location of the prisoner he was chained to. Saito attempts to deflect attention by claiming the other man died at sea, but the soldiers don't fully believe him, and the atmosphere turns dangerous. Meanwhile, hidden in the vegetation, Bronson watches the scene helplessly, knowing a single false move could cost both of them their lives. However, what none of the soldiers on the beach realize is that the noise and commotion have once again attracted the attention of the sea creature, which is lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The soldiers' arrival, far from being a salvation, becomes the trigger for a new danger, as the monster sees them as fresh prey to sate its territorial and predatory instincts. Facing this uncertainty, one of the soldiers decides to venture into the vegetation to investigate the source of the commotion, leaving his comrade guarding Saito with his weapon raised. Saito seizes the moment to insist that Bronson died in the ocean, but the soldier doesn't lower his guard and demands confirmation that the body was actually there. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream from the jungle pierces the silence, alerting the soldier on the beach that something has gone wrong. In that split second of distraction, Bronson bursts from his hiding spot to attack the guard and save Saito, unleashing immediate chaos. However, the true threat reveals itself when a severed head is tossed toward them from the thicket, confirming the investigating soldier has been brutally killed. A monstrous creature, some kind of lethal siren or amphibious being, makes its appearance and attacks with unheard-of violence, forcing Saito and Bronson to flee desperately to avoid the same fate. The escape is frantic and chaotic through the dense vegetation, with the creature hot on their heels. Saito shouts his partner's name several times to ensure they are still together, but the darkness and difficult terrain complicate everything. Mid-chase, both lose their footing and tumble down a steep slope, rolling uncontrollably until the impact leaves them dazed and separated. When Saito regains consciousness, he realizes he is alone and injured, shivering from the cold and shock, but he knows he cannot stay put if he wants to survive. Saito checks his body and discovers an object lodged in his chest, a painful wound that needs immediate attention. With great effort and pain, he manages to pull out the shard of wood and tries to compose himself to continue searching for Bronson. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the forest, Bronson wakes up on a log spanning a river, but loses his balance and falls into the water while trying to move. He manages to scramble onto the bank, soaked and alert, knowing any noise could attract the beast again. His caution is justified as he soon stumbles upon a massive crocodile resting on the riverbank. Fortunately, the animal doesn't attack, and Bronson continues on with his heart in his throat. Moving stealthily, Bronson witnesses a blood-chilling scene. The sea creature is there, a few yards away, healing the wounds inflicted on it earlier. Suddenly, the silence breaks when a crocodile surges from the water and attacks the monster, dragging it into the depths in a brutal struggle. For a second, it seems nature will take care of the problem, but the creature emerges victorious after tearing the crocodile in half with immense strength, proving it is the island's apex predator. Bronson then realizes that facing that thing in hand-to-hand combat is a death sentence. For his part, Saito continues exploring the terrain and stumbles upon a macabre find, a human corpse hanging from a tree, indicating they aren't the only ones who met a tragic end here. As he approaches to investigate, the ground gives way beneath his feet, and he falls into a pit where he discovers the head of another being similar to the one chasing them. Realizing the creature they saw isn't the only one of its kind, or that someone managed to kill one previously. Saito searches the hanging body and finds a pistol that still works, an invaluable resource in his situation. So he takes it and decides to press on with a bit more hope. Both survivors, guided by instinct or fate, converge on a waterfall where the wreckage of a crashed plane lies. Bronson arrives first and begins inspecting the fuselage for useful supplies. He improvises a spear from metal scraps and finds a flare gun and an emergency crash axe inside the cockpit, though the axe appears to be jammed. While smoking a found cigarette, he hears footsteps and readies himself to attack, but relaxes upon seeing it is Saito emerging from the trees. The reunion is brief but meaningful. Saito wastes no time and asks Bronson to follow him because he has discovered something important. Saito leads Bronson to a nearby cave hiding a terrifying secret, a massive egg belonging to the creature. Upon seeing the nest, Bronson suggests destroying it immediately to end the threat at the root, arguing they can't leave that thing alive. However, Saito tries to stop him, warning that if they kill the offspring, the mother will go mad with rage and won't stop until she hunts them down. The argument is cut short when Bronson remembers something he saw at the plane and tells Saito he has a better idea to end this once and for all. They return to the wreckage, and Bronson points out a bomb that remains intact under the aircraft's wing. His plan is to use the explosive to blow up the nest and the creature simultaneously. Bronson examines the bomb and realizes the detonation mechanism is damaged and bent, so they need a tool to fix and arm it. He remembers the axe trapped in the cockpit and tells Saito that it is the key to making his plan work, so they decide to work together to retrieve it. The operation is risky. Bronson climbs into the plane to try and dislodge the axe while Saito watches the perimeter with the flare gun ready. Tension mounts as Bronson struggles with the tool, which refuses to budge. At that critical moment, the creature makes its appearance, attracted by their scent or the noise. Saito fires the flare to try and scare or distract it, but the light is fleeting, and the monster launches its attack. Bronson finally manages to free the axe and joins the fray, striking the beast to defend his partner. The struggle is desperate. Despite their best efforts, the creature proves too strong and fast. Saito and Bronson manage to inflict minor wounds and seize a momentary opening to sprint back to the cave, axe and bomb in hand, knowing this is their only chance. Inside the cave, as Bronson frantically tries to arm the detonator by striking it with the axe, the monster charges in after them, determined to protect its nest. The beast lunges at Bronson, gravely wounding him. Forced to intervene, Saito fires his weapon directly at the creature to draw it away from his friend. Seeing that bullets aren't enough to stop it, Saito makes a drastic decision. He shoots the egg hanging from the ceiling, destroying the offspring instantly. The monster stops dead in its tracks, howling in agony at the sight of its dead young, a moment of vulnerability that buys them a few vital seconds. Maddened by grief over its destroyed offspring, the monster is momentarily paralyzed, mourning the loss. This fleeting vulnerability gives the humans a critical window of opportunity, but Bronson's situation is dire. He is severely wounded, covered in blood, and knows his body will no longer support a high-speed escape. Understanding his end is near, Bronson makes a heroic choice. He pulls out his personal effects, including his dog tags, and hands them to Saito, telling him to leave him there. Saito tries to protest, shouting his friend's name and refusing to abandon him in that deadly cave. But Bronson stands firm. He screams at him to run, to get the hell out because he will take care of finishing the job. Bronson knows the bomb's mechanism is damaged and can only be detonated by striking it manually with force. A suicide mission that requires someone to stay behind. Heartbroken but understanding his partner's sacrifice, Saito finally obeys and sprints toward the cave exit, leaving Bronson alone to face the danger and the beast. Bronson strikes the detonator with all his might, triggering a massive explosion that rumbles across the entire island. The force of the blast shakes the ground. Saito, running through the jungle away from the epicenter, stops as he feels the impact and sees the destruction. However, despite the magnitude of the blast, the threat hasn't entirely vanished. Somehow the creature, or what remains of it, is still a lethal danger stalking him on his path to freedom. Saito reaches an open clearing and realizes he must face the beast one last time if he wants to leave this cursed place alive. Saito sets a visual trap for the monster. He places a decoy, positioning himself so the creature believes he is in a specific spot, telling himself the beast needs to fixate on the false target. It is a mental game of life and death. He hides and waits with nerves of steel for the monster to take the bait. When the creature attacks the decoy, thinking it is its prey, Saito seizes the distraction to break cover. With cold, lethal determination, he launches his final attack, bidding the beast farewell with a death sentence, sending it to hell as he ends it once and for all. The scene shifts drastically after this final confrontation. The silence of the island and the noise of battle are left behind. We now find ourselves in a completely different environment. Saito is safe aboard a military ship that rescued him from the ocean. However, his safety comes with suspicion. He is being interrogated by officers trying to understand who this man found in the middle of nowhere is and what actually happened. The interrogator questions him harshly, asking directly who he is and if he is a soldier. They want to know if he was on that prisoner ship that sank, and above all, what he did to end up in this situation. The atmosphere is tense. The officers suspect him, questioning if he is a traitor who sold out his brothers in arms. Under pressure, Saito decides to tell the truth about his past, a truth he had kept hidden under the label of traitor. Saito reveals that the reason he was a prisoner on the Japanese ship was not cowardice or collaboration with the enemy, but an act of moral rebellion. He explains to the officer that he killed his own commander. He recounts that his superior was a man who sent his comrades to their deaths for money and empty orders, and that he couldn't bear to watch his men be sacrificed senselessly. So to protect them and stop the unjust dying, he made the decision to kill the one giving the orders, accepting the punishment that came with it. The interrogation then turns to the other man, Bronson. The officer has seen the dog tags or knows of the British soldier's existence and asks Saito about him. It is a moment charged with contained emotion. Saito asks for a cigarette and, after taking a drag, reflects on the strange and painful bond forged on the island. The officer insists on knowing about this Bronson. Remembering the sacrifice, the fights, the chains, and the shared survival, Saito answers with a simple but powerful truth. Bronson was his friend. That confession closes the cycle of hatred that began his story. They were no longer the prisoner and the guard, nor the Japanese and the Brit. They were simply two men who saved each other. Finally, the officer asks one last crucial question. He wants to know if anyone else was left on that island, if there are other survivors, or perhaps if they should worry about what dwells there. Staring into the distance and keeping the horrors of the creature and his friend's death to himself, Saito answers categorically that there was no one else. With this white lie or half-truth, Saito protects the island's secret or simply decides to let the past die there, ending his tale as the ship drifts away toward the horizon.